Welcome, everybody. I'm Jessica Kumke. I'm Associate Commissioner with the Horizon League, and this is another mental health series panel. Today, we're going to be talking about breaking the stigma and kind of what student athletes can do to help start that conversation around mental health. So before we get into our questions from our student athletes, we'll introduce our panelists. So Allison, I'm going to have you introduce yourself first.
Oh, sure. Hello, my name is Allison Newlin. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor. That means I am licensed to treat and diagnose in the realm of mental health or emotional disorders. I have been contracted and partnered with Wright State University Athletics for going on about 10 years now. So my role with Wright State is to really provide direct services to our student athletes, as well as ensure that our student athletes are aware of our services, and provide education throughout the year as well in the realm of mental health and wellness.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. And Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Steve Campbell. I'm Vice President of Communications for the Indianapolis Colts. And we, led by our ownership group, the Jim Irsay family, have launched over the last 2 years an initiative called Kicking the Stigma, which is a comprehensive initiative where we're using the Colts and the NFL platform to raise awareness about mental health, and then also to remove that stigma that's so often associated with mental health disorders. And so we, as an entire organization, we've dove into this issue head first, and we have learned so much and are looking forward to learning more.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it. So like I said, we got about 5 questions that we have our student athletes submitted, and we're going to start with sort of not necessarily a student specific one, but just more of a general question of how can you kind of talk to somebody and explain to them that, it's okay to talk about mental health, like how to just even take that first step of approaching that subject with somebody. And I don't know, Allison, I'll kick it to you first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that so that reminds me of, I have the privilege, the opportunity to meet with student athletes when they're first coming into university. So there's an orientation where I have the opportunity to speak to all the student athletes at one time. I also have the ability to meet with student athletes when they're coming in as freshmen for the very first time or transferring into the university, again, just to let them know my services. But within those opportunities to speak to our student athletes directly, especially the ones coming in, I am very clear about the culture that we have at Wright State, which is mental health is part of our culture. Caring about our mental health, talking about our mental health is part of what we do here, just like we take care and prioritize our physical health, our academic health, our social health, and these other areas as well. And so I think it's important to talk about it right from the beginning so that as they're coming into it, it's like, oh, this is what we do. This is who we are. And again, kind of comparing that to physical health, right? Our student athletes are a population that it's easy to prioritize physical health from a standpoint of wanting to meet their goals. And so just making sure that they have the education that mental health is just as important to our wellness, but also to our success and to our goals. And so being able to see mental health as not just an opportunity to get us from like illness to our baseline, but also an opportunity to take us from our baseline even further, right? So it's not just dealing with illness, although that's critically important to know what to look out for and make those referrals. But it's also about thriving, I think, and living our best lives as well.
Yeah, and I think over the last 2 years, especially since the pandemic, there's been kind of a critical mass of discussion and activity around mental health. So I think that's going a long way to destigmatizing the issue and making people more open to talking about it. And I think the best way, I think what Allison said is exactly right. Working in professional athletics, we're getting the student athlete, once they've gone through however many years of school, and they're with us now. And so I think emphasizing that you have to put as much work into your mental emotional side as you do your physical side, I think is a great way of approaching this issue, because all of these athletes have been trained over years and years and years with a laser focus to be attuned to their bodies and to know exactly how their body works and when something's not right. And they've been training that for years. And so I think that the best way is to say, hey, this is just as important, not only to your performance on the field or on the court or whatever sport you're in, but also to whenever you stop playing the sport. That these are all lessons that everyone can learn and hopefully take to heart.
Awesome. So getting a little more specific then, so if I'm a student athlete and I want to start having a conversation with my coach about mental health, any thoughts on kind of how to start that conversation if you're the student athlete, having that with your coach? Say, whoever wants to go first.
Well, I'm guessing, and Allison, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing that that's probably a pretty tough thing to do for a lot of students because they're trying to impress the coach with their athletic prowess, and they're trying to impress the coach, impress coaching staff, teammates, and everything like that. So to go into a coach and to admit, hey, I'm having some struggles, that's probably a pretty tough thing to do. But I think it's incumbent upon our coaches to at the very outset to let people know, hey, this is a safe place, So I kind of throw some of that responsibility onto our coaching or to our coaches across the country for them at the outset to let all the students know that you can come to me with this, with these issues, and it's not going to affect the way I think about you or how much playing time you get. But for them to create that safe and welcoming space, I think is extremely important.
Yeah, Steve, I couldn't agree with you more on that. When I first hear that question, I'm tempted to do the same thing and to flip that responsibility to our administration and to our coaching staff. But it is an important question that our student athletes might be wanting to know, right? Even though I still believe that responsibility is on the coaches, right, to make sure that they are providing that space, Steve, as you're speaking to. But I think that if student athletes are in that situation, possibly linking in their athletic trainers to their process, as we're speaking to viewing mental health as critically important as physical health, athletic trainers can be, part of that process, just like they would be if it was something else as well. And so hopefully student athletes have a relationship with their coaches that feels trusted. And there's also assistant coaches too, if there's more of a dynamic. I think student athletes need to do what's in their best interest and what they think's in their best interest, but being clear about what your objective is. And so if you're wanting to start a conversation with your coach, being clear about what it is you're wanting your coach to know and why, what it is you're needing from your coach, how they could potentially support you. And so maybe having a conversation or maybe giving that some thought prior to that meeting can kind of sometimes help organize some of those thoughts and that objective a little bit easier.
Yeah, I agree. I say, and you kind of touched on it, administrators needing to be a part of this process as well. And so I think that kind of leads into their next question of how do we sort of, I want to say, normalize talking about mental health as a bigger part of a team. So whether that's getting coach on board with normalizing sort of this mental health awareness, or it's getting the administrators or even your teammates to realize that as a team, it's okay that we talk about mental health and any challenges that we're having. Any tips or ideas on that kind of a question?
Yeah, I think to what we mentioned earlier, first and foremost, the leaders, the coaches and the leaders of the team have to make sure that every athlete on that team understands it's a safe place. I think that's vital. They have to, know on day one that I can come in and talk to my teammates and talk to my coaches and talk to other folks about these issues. And then, what we're doing now, I think, is going a long way too, is having more and more sessions and more people talking about this issue. And again, like I mentioned, since the pandemic, even before the pandemic, we've seen this critical mass of activity and attention, and a lot of, particularly a lot of high profile athletes stepping up and talking about this issue. I think we need more and more of that. When Michael Phelps and Naomi Osaka and Kevin Love and Darius Shaquille Leonard, who's on the Indianapolis Colts, when a lot of these folks step up and say, "Hey, I struggle too," I think that gives a great pass to the rest of us to talk about it as well. So I think having that safe environment set by the administration and the coaches, but then just encouraging more and more of this dialogue among people like us, and then among students themselves.
Yeah, I would agree. Within that, encouraging that dialogue, I think that comes into just continuing to create this culture, right, that we have, or that we're promoting. And so I always kind of joke that as a therapist, I'm trained from a standpoint of confidentiality, right? So if I were to see a client, to really not acknowledge that client and to kind of go off of what they may or may not, right? If they say hello, I might say hello back. But with student athletes at Wright State, it's kind of, all those lines are a little bit blurred. They're calling my name out from, across campus, like, hey, Allison, or I'll walk into the room, Allison, ask me questions. And I think that really speaks to really destigmatizing mental health, right? And being able to recognize that we have providers on campus and we have providers in our department, right, that are providing these services, and they're part of us. They're people that we want to talk to. They're people we want to ask questions to. So I think putting it out there as much as we can, right? Like our athletic director is constantly promoting me and speaking highly of me. Our coaching staff, our athletic trainers. And so it's so easy for these student athletes to trust that I'm a trusted person, that talking about mental health is something that's appropriate because everybody around them is doing it.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll add is, the Indianapolis Colts, we have someone in Allison's position, a team clinician who's available to meet with players, coaches, staff, anyone in the organization. And the one thing that again, with professional athletes who always try to be bigger, stronger, faster, tougher than the rest of us, you would think that there would be a stigma for them going to see this team clinician, but she's around our building all the time, and she sits in our lunchroom, and you see guys just come up, give her hugs, and sit down and talk with her, and they're not worried that someone's like, oh, so and so sitting over there talking to the team clinician, I wonder what's wrong. And I think that came from the culture, a word that Allison just used, the culture that we created here at the Indianapolis Colts and with our ownership group. I mean, this is very, very important to them, and they set the tone throughout our entire building. And then we've had again, a 2-year media campaign that we've been pushing on kicking the stigma. And so I think those things made our players feel more comfortable reaching out to our team clinician, and I wish you could see her around our facility, because she's as popular as anyone here, and no one seems to mind.
Awesome. So if I'm a student athlete, and knowing that I am not trained necessarily to deal with mental health problems, but I see a teammate that's struggling, what can I do to sort of help them?
Yeah, I think one, going back to, I want to get into that question because it's important, but also just want to get a shout out to administrators, right? Because it's so important that we're continuing to educate our student athletes throughout the years, that they know what to look out for, that they're given on a yearly basis. These are the signs for this. These are the signs for this. This is what this looks like, and this is what you can do. So it's important that we're answering this now. I think that we're continuing to remind them year after year. I think that they need to be reminded that they just really need to be there, right? Being able to just ask and check in, how are you doing? Providing empathy and just listening, not having to try to fix anything. And then just having the resources to be able to provide that support, right? And so being able to say, thank you so much for sharing this with me, and that sounds really difficult. Have you thought about talking to Allison, or have you reached out to Allison? And again, as we're speaking to that being within the culture, that doesn't necessarily feel like a stretch for student athletes, right? When topics of mental health are really so present.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think sharing, encouraging students to share with each other. I mean, again, that's a tough thing to do. And that's why we're here talking about this entire stigma conversation. But I think from athlete to student athlete to student athlete, I don't think you have to walk up to someone and say, hey, I fear you're having a mental disorder and let me help. I mean, because again, that might that might put someone off, or someone might not be ready to talk about it. And we've always been big when we've been talking about this is don't push someone farther than they're ready to go at that point in time. But I think it's very important to make sure that the other student athlete knows that you were there, and so you can knows that you're there if they want to talk. And I think it's great to continuously check in. You might start to feel like you're being annoying, but I think it's okay to continuously check in and just know that, again, you're a safe person to talk to. And I think, and then if that person, wants to open up about something, that they're going through, because everyone's going through something. Everyone, if it's not themselves, it's a family member, it's a friend, it's a classmate. And so just letting them know that, hey, I'm a safe person to talk to, is, I think, a big step.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We kind of talked before. I know several of our campuses have the Green Bandana Project, which that's part of their whole thing is the green bandana tied on a backpack or a green ribbon or whatever to let people know, hey, I'm someone you can come talk to. So yeah, I think that's great as well. So the last question we had from our student athletes is really kind of the question we've been talking about the entire time of what are other ways that student athletes can really kind of help break this stigma around mental health, whether on their campus, in their community, even in their own family. What are some ways they can kind of help do that?
I think, what I said earlier about athletes, and again, it's how we in society look up to our athletes, because again, they are bigger, stronger, faster, tougher than the rest of us, and that's kind of that's why we look up to them in their athletic performances. So when athletes themselves step up and can show a little bit of vulnerability, I think that goes so far, again, because of how much of a pedestal that we tend to put our athletes up on. So when you have someone, I mentioned one of our players, Shaquille Leonard, on the football field, he's an absolute terror. His nickname is the Maniac because he's just a terror on the field. But when someone like that steps up and says, "Hey, I struggle," that just sends a powerful message to the rest of us that even someone who is designed and built to be stronger than the rest of us struggles, then hey, maybe it's okay if I struggle too.
Yes. And I would add to that when we're able to witness that, it allows us to almost reframe or look at this in a different way. And what I want to get to here is that one of the things student athletes can do is kind of counter either stereotypes or things that are myths that they might hear. And one of the things I'm hearing you speak to, Steve, right, is this myth, right, that if I'm seeking some kind of mental health treatment or talking about my mental health, that there's some kind of weakness because of this vulnerability, right? And if there's a population that knows about utilizing resources to gain strength, it's this population, right? I mean, they've got athletic trainers, they've got I mean, every sector in the smartest way possible, right? They're utilizing these resources to get stronger and smarter and better and get closer to their goals. So I'll talk about that a lot. Why would we not? Why would we not utilize a resource to also help us, with our focus, with our clarity, with our emotional regulation? Why would we not do that? And so helping empower our student athletes to recognize that this is a very strong thing to be doing. And I remind them a lot, like, you're still doing this work on your own, right? Student athletes will often say, well, I tried to do this on my own and I really wanted to do this, on my own. Well, you are, right? You're still the one that's going to be doing the lifting. You're still the one that's going to be doing this work. You have a guide, and that's smart, right, to have. And so helping them recognize that this is a show of strength, right? To be able to recognize here's an area that I'm feeling like I could use a little bit of assistance and get a little bit of assistance and strength in this area.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Great answers to all the questions. I'm sure our student athletes are going to get a lot out of this, and anybody who watches our videos. So we really appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for participating.